Okay, hi, I'm Matt Boone, Senior Research Director at ADAPT, and as part of the ADAPT International Women's Day Women in Tech program, it's my real pleasure to welcome Katherine McDermott, who is currently the startup and founder of See Me Please, which is a marketplace looking to disrupt the approach to digital accessibility. Prior to that, Katie was actually the lead for digital services at Service New South Wales. Katie, welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Nice to be here, Matt. Thanks for having me.
All right. So a few things I want to talk about, really just to get some of your perspectives in terms of, your career, how you sort of progressed through the tech industry, some advice, obviously, for your women peers in the industry and looking to get into the industry as well. And I think just perhaps to kick off, let's sort of, if you like, think about your journey, where we are today. And I always like to obviously start in terms of getting a bit of a grounding in terms of, some of the steps you've kind of taken, if you like, to get to where you are today, and particularly in terms of maybe some of the challenges you faced as a woman, as you've strived to sort of grow your career and, get to where you are today as a woman in tech.
Sure. Well, my path to tech wasn't a planned one. I sort of fell into it and just sort of seized opportunities as they arose. I never thought about pursuing a career in tech when I set out, thinking about my career. And people talk about tech being male-dominated. I guess it's all about sort of perspective. And prior to working in tech, I worked in the coal mining industry and lived in a range of remote and regional coal mining towns. And it's far well represented in the tech community than it is sort of coal mining. So, yeah, it's all relative. But I was offered an opportunity, actually, coming back from parental leave, my second child, to step into a role with Service New South Wales. I had no tech experience whatsoever then. I think I did a reasonably good job in the role previously, prior to heading on parental leave. And that was just such a unique situation and an example of what good looks like, coming back from parental leave, being offered a promotion in a sector that you have no experience with, and I guess sort of really illustrates how great the public service is to work for. So, yes, I was offered a wonderful opportunity, and that experience filled my cup like I didn't know I needed. It was such a great role that grew exponentially. Delivering 1,500 services relied upon by 8 million people across the state, and so incredibly broad from registering the death of a loved one right through to licensing or getting a tree lopped. You name it, it was sort of in my portfolio. So yeah, it was a wonderful gig.
Okay, so I'm interested in that one, Katie, as well, because quite often we start with the discussion around, well, why tech? Why should I get into tech? That kind of thing. Did you kind of? I'm thinking as you spoke then that perhaps you were looking more at the bigger picture, not technology itself, but what technology could actually achieve if we sort of applied it effectively. And was that what really appealed to you as you thought about the role?
If I'm honest with you, I was sort of coming back from parental leave. I knew I'd sort of spun my cycles in the role previously. I was thinking about what was next, and I kind of got nudged into, really you should go and work for this agency. It's fresh and dynamic, and it's a really unique part of government. I wouldn't say I sort of dragged my heels at all, but I wasn't sort of jumping for joy thinking about I was going to, when I thought about IT, I thought about, administering phones or sitting there on MS-DOS, managing a help desk or something. So I had no idea what I was up for. But I'm so glad that I did sort of take that opportunity, because it was just, such a brilliant experience.
Mm-hmm. Excellent, that's good. So if you think about that, obviously you mentioned a couple of things there, but as you look at your journey to where you are today, are there sort of any, I guess, milestones, if you like, that really stand out, particularly in terms of that sort of tech side of things? What sort of calls out to you in terms of major achievements, if you like?
Yeah, I don't know. Probably like many women, I don't really like talking about achievements or my career. I guess, the more I've learned about technology, the more I realize how little I know, and how more interested I become. The deeper I sort of build out my domain expertise, the more I realize there is to learn. And I really like that. So yes, I like the problems that technology solves for, but I'm also really interested in the technology itself.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's interesting. So do you think that there's a real need to have that, if you like, core interest in the technology to actually succeed in technology, or do you think there's also, is it kind of a balance between the two?
I think it can grow. If you'd asked me 5 years ago, I would say, I don't know, I'm here to solve problems, and I like that technology is a mechanism to get there. But now, as I've learned a little bit more and a little bit more as time goes on, it's actually how clever the technology can be that probably interests me more than the business outcomes these days. So I don't necessarily think you need to have one or the other, or that you need to have, a certain box ticked to be able to pursue a career in tech. It can kind of grow as you grow in your career.
Mm-hmm. Good point, actually. I mean, personally as well, I started out in a very, very non-tech industry, retail. So I guess it's a bit more techie now. But anyway, if you think about the Australian technology industry today, and obviously that you can't really pick up a newspaper or look online, for example, without conversations about the sort of imbalance from a gender point of view within the local market and indeed globally. I'd just love to get some thoughts from you in terms of how effective are organizations being, if you like, some of the programs they're putting in place to encourage women to enter IT? I mean, the things like diversity targets and so on, are these effective, or are they just kind of ticking the box kind of thing, do you think?
Well, I'm one of 4 girls myself, and I've got 3 daughters, and I'm surrounded by brilliant women. So I guess sort of I come at that question with the perspective that, I'm constantly amazed by many of the understated achievements of the women that surround me in my life. And I think there's a skill shortage, full stop. In Australia, there's very little sort of technical capability that's been built over the years compared to many other countries. And I suspect many organisations here felt that over the last few years with, in Service New South Wales, as an example, we had a 50% vacancy rate with engineers. There's no single lever, there's no silver bullet here that you can go and grab for. There's a royal obligation, I think, on all government agencies and enterprise organisations to actually build the capability and do it in a smart way. And you know what, while you're there, set a target of 50% women into those sort of emerging roles or cadetships or whatever it might be. Unless there's sort of a different approach, nothing's ever going to change. You're never going to find a surplus of, female software engineers sitting there waiting for roles. So I think it's up to industry really to kind of solve the problem.
Mm-hmm. And do you think with that there's more we can be doing sort of internally with our existing people as well, Katie? So it's one thing to attract women into technology, but what do we need to be doing to encourage internally to sort of uplift the capabilities within organizations also? Do you think that's an area we need to be doing a better job at as well?
Yeah, and most people in technology love data. I think a great exercise, maybe over and above any pink frosted cupcakes at a Women's Day morning tea, is just to do some analysis over the gender pay gap. So not just women versus male, but what's the proportion or likelihood of women at the top end of the bands versus male, or how does the remuneration of a female sort of progress if they've been on parental leave, an example, compared to people who haven't. Looking at the gender pay gap by job group, not just sort of, a single dimension of it. I suspect the data will tell the story as to whether there's more work to be done or not for each respective organisation.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I guess also sort of building on that as well. Obviously, we have things like International Women's Day, and we have groups, whether it's on LinkedIn or other areas where women do connect together. But how important is it, do you think, to have if you like, mentors or role models, as we're looking to accelerate our careers within organizations in general? What was that important within your career? Any sort of thoughts on how that sort of impacted your journey in terms of being able to connect with the right people and get that input?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily a gender issue. I think everyone should sort of have mentors or people that they can turn to. And I think, particularly as your career progresses, it's so important to have trusted counsel, someone that can give you frank and fearless advice. Otherwise, you can live in an echo chamber. The only people you're dealing with are vendors that want to sell you something and, inundate you with compliments, or, politicians, for example, if you work in the public service, giving them announceables and all the successes to celebrate. So I think it's critically important to have trusted counsel and friends that can give you frank and fearless feedback. Otherwise, you can get a distorted sense of the world.
No, that's a really good point, isn't it? Because I think so often, many times we hear what we want to hear, not what we want to, and we really can't evolve and grow. We don't actually get that, that clear counsel in terms of what we need to be doing differently. So I think that's really good
It's
advice.
not always fun though, Matt, hearing that.
No, it's not always fun. That's right. You've got to be a bit thick-skinned as well to take some of that at the end of the day. But also, as long as it's always backed up, I guess, by, and perhaps think about doing this or doing that, to kind of move on from there. But that's good thinking. So obviously, in your role now at See Me Please, I'm interested in terms of when we think about local organisations and government as well. What do we need to be doing, if you like, to ensure that we're really addressing the needs of diverse women in the workforce? Like, there's no one size fits all kind of thing as we think about, gender within organisations and industry in general. Are there any sort of organisations or communities you might recommend for women to, connect and support each other, particularly the sort of, the more diverse people we have in our workforce? Any thoughts on that?
It's a good point. I think that sort of intersectionality of insights and feedback is really important. Just because you've sort of bounced some ideas off 2 or 3 women doesn't mean you've necessarily represented women as a whole. No. There's many sort of different complexities there and different challenges, I guess, that people have. Look, it's very simple. My sort of suggestion is just talk to them. If you can sort of get feedback directly, have a good pulse check across a good cross-representation of people, that's how you're going to get the best advice in an environment where people feel psychologically safe to be able to give unedited feedback.
Mm-hmm. Also, I guess building on that, so okay, when you and I spoke before in your new role, you talked about this is kind of this very large, if you like, community of people living with disabilities in the local marketplace, and not necessarily visibly. Some don't actually want to talk about it, and I guess when we think about it from a women in tech point of view as well, is that sort of disability challenge relating to women even more of an issue, if you like, than it might be for other parts of the community? Is that something which needs to be addressed a bit more heavily as well?
I don't know whether it's necessarily disability related, but I certainly know new migrants that come to Australia or refugees that come to Australia that are women are less likely to find employment than men. And if you sort of even take a step back, irrespective of where you're looking at men or female, the employment rate for people with disability has sat at 53% for 28 years versus the employment rate for the general population at 83 years. And disability isn't necessarily a one-size-fits-all. It's a real spectrum of people across many, many, many different types of disabilities that can participate in the workforce in quite a meaningful way and create great value for organisations. So, yeah, absolutely. I think that's a pool of brilliant candidates that represent the vibrant communities that we live in that employers really should be making a concerted effort on in terms of targeting capability.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I guess building on that, sort of leading on to the whole sort of skills conversation as well. If you think about skills today, are there any sort of particular areas related to skills or expertise that you would say are, valuable is probably the wrong word, but areas women really should be leaning into a bit more heavily? I can think about things like AI and data, for example. We've got massive skill shortages, but massive opportunity into the future. So any sort of thoughts around that, particularly as typically, research shows that, women tend to gravitate towards the humanities and men towards the STEM, for example. What can we do to actually identify specific technology areas which really, offer the greatest opportunity, if you like, for women in tech?
I think anything and everything really, but part of it is that they may not necessarily just present in terms of these opportunities. You might need to look creatively at how you sort of nudge someone that has, an analytical mind to think about a career opportunity that they haven't thought of otherwise. And, this is probably a bit rich coming from me because I'm no wallflower, but there's a great article, I think it was written in 2016 by Julie Baird, that sort of said, how to carry yourself with confidence of a mediocre white man, how to carry yourself with the confidence of a mediocre white man. Sometimes women just, need a bit more of a push than perhaps their male colleagues may.
Okay. I love that quote, actually. That's a good one.
It's a really good read. It's a one-page read. It's really light reading, but it's quite a powerful message in there. Okay.
And I guess finally, as you think about, things we've talked about, and I guess your position right now, and obviously your peers around the world as well, what really matters to you, if you like, as an ally to enable advancing women in their technology careers? What's a couple of things that sort of really stand out for you in terms of what you would, if you like, implore women to be doing to really advance their careers in tech?
I think really just to seize opportunities as they arise. Don't be backwards in coming forwards. Really, what's the risk of putting your hand up for something, even if you feel a bit uncomfortable or vulnerable? And yeah, I guess I've just constantly been amazed by the women that I've been surrounded with, personally and professionally. I think sort of the world's your oyster, really.
Mm-hmm. That's really good advice, isn't it? Because it's a classic, seize the day or whatever, look for opportunities and really think about what you can do differently and do more effectively as well. So that's great. Katie, thank you very much indeed. Always a pleasure to talk with you in person.